Welcome to the Sweat. It's Thursday and the NFL is buzzing. I bet Emerson Latzia is too. Say hello to DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich, Pierce Dietrich, and Reed Fowler. Guys, before we get started, let's react to the news breaking overnight. I mean, I woke up this morning and I was like, what? I mean, Jags fire Urban Meyer. All right, their game this week against Houston, they're favored by 4 points, moved from 3.5 points last night. Any renewed faith in this line this week after the news? And are you more inclined to maybe roster a Jaguar in DFS this week? Like James Robinson, only 5,400. His usage has been a topic all season under Meyer. So like Jeff, just first general reaction.
I mean, my first general reaction was to text Reed and Emerson, who were already asleep. I don't sleep though, Jeff. I don't miss news like this. But yeah, I mean, look, the line in the Jacksonville Houston Texans game, it's already moved from -4 to -5. It really does show you what the market and the thinking mentality was around Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars before. So interesting to note there. I think some of us came on the show yesterday and were thinking, the Texans might even be a good bet just because of how deflated and how down everyone was on Urban Meyer. Now that narrative is obviously out the door. So I do think that the Jaguars are an interesting bet here. I do think that a guy like James Robinson is probably going to see the field a lot more in this situation as well. And I do think that's where you should be thinking of. But there's other players too, like Laviska Shenault, a player I've talked about a couple times. He's like 4,100 on the main slate. He hasn't scored a touchdown all year. I mean, I can't see this guy not getting a few more targets. He's been underutilized all year as well. So yeah, it's an interesting narrative to jump on. Maybe we're building this up too much, but this is such a unique situation with how hated and how despised this guy was, and I'm talking about Urban Meyer, by the players and by the rest of the coaches, that I just think it's inevitable that you're going to see some kind of positive reaction from this move.
Pierce, do you agree with that?
I do. I don't want to overreact to, these players are still the same players, the same guys that got to go out there and execute, but I'm sure everyone has been in a work environment where there was a toxic person, and as soon as that person was gone, things change, at least in the short run. I don't think there's going to be long-term success, but I would imagine in the short run, the mood, the feelings, the optimism, the motivation, it's all going to increase tenfold. And you're going to get probably the best game of the season out of those guys. I know that's highly narrative driven, but I think everyone that definitely resonates with them. They've experienced that. Now, from the DFS perspective, these players just aren't very good. James Robinson, a lot of his volume concerns, maybe it was because of Urban Meyer, maybe it was because of injuries or negative game scripts, and all that stuff can happen. If things line up perfectly for him, then yeah, he's a great play, but he also needs a good line. He needs his team not to fall behind. I just don't want to go near any of these guys, and there's just no point really here.
Reed, how do we feel about this? You don't want to overreact?
I mean, I think Emerson's probably going to have a firestorm of tweets about Urban Meyer and Josh Lambo, his two favorite people or topics to talk about if it's not the Sass and Springers. But yeah, these guys laid it out pretty nicely, right? That the market is an emotional depiction of how people feel on certain news, right? And now the news is that addition by subtraction, right? You take out Urban Meyer, and now the Jaguars are all of a sudden a 5-point favorite. I still don't look, a lot of my narrative and a lot of my reasons for liking Houston was because of Urban Meyer. But now you're giving me 2 extra points. This is still a bad team. Like, they might be freer. We might see them get a little bit better in the first half. So maybe if you want to go Jacksonville first half, which I don't even know why you would, is fine. But I'm still on Houston here. I think they're better coached, right? Because they actually have a coach. And I don't think Davis Mills is that bad of a quarterback. Now, am I running to make this bet? Absolutely not. It might actually even get higher as we get closer to Sunday. So if it's either Houston or stay away. I'm not going close to betting Jacksonville as a favorite.
Hear that, Emerson? This is still a bad team. Okay, Titans take the bye week and rebound against the Jags after losing 2 straight games. They're 9-4 going against the Steelers team, who only has 1 win in their last 5 games. So is the 1 point in favor of the Titans too low for this one, Pierce?
I think it's too high. It's striking to me how similar these teams are. You look up and down and match them up against each other, they're pretty similar. I mean, maybe Pittsburgh's got slightly better skill position players at wide receiver, but not by much, and that's debatable. Running back situation for both teams isn't great. Najee Harris, very disappointing season. He's run into the rookie wall, and I mean, that happens for all rookies, especially when he's on 95% of the snaps. He doesn't have an offensive line. Both these quarterbacks aren't playing well. One of the things they both do well is a pass rush. And when I look at that pass rush, I don't trust Tannehill And I don't necessarily trust Roethlisberger, but if you look at his pocket time, he's completely changed who he has been over the years. He used to take a ton of sacks, he used to stay back there, try to make things happen. He releases the ball quicker than anyone else. I guess he got hit way too many times. He's learned his lesson. So that might neutralize, the one strength of Tennessee, which is their pass rush. So I think Pittsburgh can win this thing outright at home.
All right, what's your take, Reed? Do you actually like Pittsburgh in this one?
Not necessarily, but I'm going to agree with Pierce in saying it's too high. I think this is more of a pick 'em because, like Pierce laid out, right? He mentioned, I think these teams are a lot closer than people like to think. Like Tennessee is getting a little bit too much love, in my opinion, for beating a Jacksonville Jaguars team off a bye, not giving up any points. And they went on a really good stretch, Titans did, right? Where they beat those teams, 5 in a row. Either playoff last year or pending playoffs this year teams. But then they kind of hit their wall as well. Like the part about defensive line, right, in terms of the Steelers against the offensive line for the Tennessee Titans, that's what's going to worry me about Tennessee with their lack of explosive plays, especially when they don't have one of their best players like A.J. Brown. Julio Jones obviously is healthy. I know Jeff's going to talk about these running backs and how they're explosive in college and how they're better than a lot of people expect. But it's still the Tennessee Titans that don't have Derrick Henry. Right, they're still trying to figure that out. So I'm going to say that this is more of a pick 'em and it's a little bit too high. And Tennessee ranks second in rush D. I get that, and Pittsburgh ranks pretty bad in defense. But I still think this is too high. I think this is going to go either way.
All right, Jeff, what's your take?
I've tried all season to convince Reed and Pierce that the Tennessee Titans are a decent team, and it's obviously failed. I have failed as an analyst, as a parent, whatever. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but. No, this one is too low. There's really not that much similar about these teams. The Tennessee Titans defense is playing extremely well. For the last 3 games, they've allowed 2.8 yards per carry. You know what the Pittsburgh Steelers have allowed? 5.5, the worst in the NFL. I don't care who's back there at running back for the Tennessee Titans this week because they're going to be able to run the ball, and Pittsburgh is going to have a tough time moving the ball. The Titans have also improved in their secondary, although Pierce won't admit it. And look, I think that the one area I do agree is that the QB play in this game, it's been subpar on both sides. But I will take a mobile Ryan Tannehill to pick up a few first downs with his legs, a little bit of play action over whatever Ben Roethlisberger does on 3rd down, which is drop back 8 steps and then get sacked. No, I think the Titans have been, especially over the last 3 games. I know they've lost a few games, but they were also dealing with major injury concerns. I think the Titans are clearly the better team here. And I think they're getting a little bit disrespected. This is one of my favorite spots of the week to take the Titans.
All right, guys, a growing list of players on the reserve COVID list for Washington. So is the 7 points too low for a team heading on the road to Philly to face a division opponent for a big game that could determine a wild card seed here? What do we think, Reed?
Yeah, well, just to go back to that last one, Jeff, they played the Texans and they played the Jaguars in 2 of their last 3 games. So, just take that for what it's worth with Urban Meyer. I'm going to say yes. I do think that this is too high. If anything, it should be less than a touchdown because Philly getting a touchdown as a favorite, even after their bye, is asinine this season because we just don't know, right? Philly, they cover against bad teams. And that's what we have to figure out here is if Washington football team, without a lot of their players, like you mentioned, Jesse, if they're a bad team, I think they've played up they play up to their opponents, the football team does, but they're banged up. Terry McLaurin is in concussion protocol. Let's see if he gets through. It looks like Heineke is going to play with that elbow injury. I'm going to say it's a little too high. I like this match, especially with the low total, what it is at 44. When you get a touchdown favorite or a touchdown spread, there's a lot more variance involved with a lower scoring game when you get this involved. So I'm going to say it's too high and Washington can cover here.
All right, Jeff, what do we think?
I mean, this line is just begging you to take Washington. And I don't know if I can't not fall into the trap, if that makes sense, because asking the Eagles to cover 7, I mean, let's not forget. I know there's COVID and issues going on with Washington, but Jalen Hurts, he may not start. And I get it. People, we had the one nice game of Gardner Minshew. I still think Jalen Hurts gives you a better shot at moving the ball with Philadelphia long term. So that's something to consider for Philly too. Right now, the market is telling you, well, there's no big deal if Minshew steps in. I'm not sure if that's the case here. And again, I mean, we talked about this earlier in the week with the low total. Reed's right. I mean, I kind of expect some kind of 20-14, 20-17 game here. And at 7 points, I mean, asking the Eagles to cover, it's just not really a spot I want to take them. So I'm going to wait and see where the injury concerns and stuff line up. But right now, I kind of have my eyes on taking Washington +7.
All right, Pierce, what do you have your eye on?
It's too low for me. I mean, 18 players added for the COVID list. 9 of them were starters. That's a huge deal. They already had 13 players on the injured reserve. Before this COVID issue, we already knew that the injuries were piling up, and we were kind of surprised that they were still finding ways to win games, losing key players in the secondary, their rookie of the year MVP pass rusher last season. Their quarterback is banged up. Their receivers are banged up. It's been issue after issue all season. This one's just too much. This is basically going to be the Washington practice squad. Maybe they hang in there for a quarter or two, but I cannot see them hanging in for 4 quarters against a well-rested Philadelphia team that's been planning for Washington for the last 2 weeks, which is planning for Washington for a month because they're going to play Washington once more in a couple weeks. Philadelphia is going to be completely prepared for this game. And then Washington, they don't score to begin with when they're healthy. They can't score in the red zone, as Jeff always likes to point out. How's this version of Washington going to put points on the board? So this is too low.
All right, finally, Packers going to Baltimore, favored by 5. John Harbaugh says Lamar Jackson is day to day. So, is it time to jump on the Packers at -5 before the line maybe moves, or do you feel like 5 is a good number, Jeff?
I definitely think it's time to jump on the Packers here. I mean, this one has obviously, I think most people are waiting to get this Lamar Jackson news, and I think that he will play ultimately. That's just me speculating. But once he does, let's even just put it out there and say there's a scenario where he does play. I think the line starts to move back towards the Ravens. So you could jump on it now, but if that scenario doesn't work out, then you're going to be getting the Packers at a very good number because they'll be moving back up closer to 7. The big thing is here, I just think the Packers are going to win this game by a touchdown or more. I mean, I think they're clearly the better team. Jari Alexander now practicing. And realistically, we've been fading the Ravens all season. So now that their best player, the guy who carries them week in, week out with big plays at the end of the game, is banged up and not 100%, now you want to start jumping on them? It just makes no sense to me. I think this line should be closer to 7 regardless of whether Lamar plays or not. So, yeah, I think -5, you're fine. You can wait and see if the line moves back once Lamar gets confirmed that he's going to play. But I think jumping on at -5 is the player.
Is that the play, Pierce?
Oh. Yes, it's always the play. Always the play. Take the Packers. All the Packers do is cover. 11-2 against the spread. Last week, they were 12.5 favorites against the Bears. That never seemed to be in doubt. They're in control always. They score points. They've got a good defense. Don't doubt the Packers, and always doubt the Ravens. Even with Lamar Jackson, when he was healthy, they weren't playing well. The offensive line has issues. His receivers are inconsistent. His play is inconsistent. The defense is a shell of its former self. All of them are injured. They haven't played well in the last couple of seasons. I mean, the stats are just piling up against the Ravens. And then if you're going to have a hobbled Lamar Jackson, I just don't see them at all having a chance in this game.
Reed, 3 for 3?
Yeah, the Packers are much worse covering on the road with only one time that they haven't covered on the road ATS, right? They've covered every single time at home. They haven't covered once on the road. So they're a really good team. The one thing I will say, though, if you are keen on taking the Baltimore Ravens and you're waiting for Lamar Jackson and you think, for whatever reason, you have some knowledge and your fingers on the pulse that you think he's going to play, the Green Bay Packers give up the most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season. If that's the case, this could be a number where you could get a lot for a guy like Lamar Jackson. How much is he going to run? He's got a bum ankle. We don't know. I will just say that, but I'm with these guys. You got to take Green Bay right now. All they do is cover.
All right, thanks, guys. We're not done with football just yet, though. We have to get these guys' picks for Thursday night football. And before we get to the 10-game NHL slate, let's get Steve and Julian's thoughts on tonight's Chiefs-Chargers game on the Unreasonable Odds pod.
First one was the Chiefs -3 at -115. It's touched 4. Now it's 3.5 -110 as we record on Tuesday afternoon. Look, the Chargers are fine and they're at home. I don't really care about them being at home because it doesn't matter for them. Chiefs lost at Arrowhead earlier in the season, revenge spot. Chiefs are just rolling right now. They have it back. The offensive line is clicking, the defense is clicking, and Mahomes is Mahomes. So I just like the Chiefs in general to finish this season really strong, the regular season at least really strong. We have them, as we gave out on this podcast and in my Best Bets article, Right before that Dallas game, Chiefs division was a pick 'em. Chiefs -110, and then the field. We have Kansas City to win the division. This is a huge game for that. So I'm not going too overweight on this game, but the Chargers have been all over the place. So we're going to give them credit for smashing the Giants and Mike Glennon. The Chiefs have done more. The Chiefs wins have more substance in my mind lately. And I think we're going to see that play out on Thursday night, even though it's a short week on the road.
And of course, the Chargers are dealing with a multitude of issues, like with COVID issues and all that, with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. So there's that to consider.
And the offensive line, Slater.
Yep.
First round pick.
So a lot of issues with the Chargers in that sense. And the Chiefs, quite frankly, they've been really strong against a run lately. So if they're able to contain Austin
and Eckler's hurt.
Yep. So, if it's containing Austin Eckler or Joshua Kelly or Justin Jackson, whatever it is, they've been strong against the run. So if that's forcing Justin Herbert to throw the ball more, what is going to be his arsenal coming into this game? Will he have Keenan Allen back? Is Mike Williams going to be ready to go? Is it going to be Palmer Guyton? There's a lot of question marks for the Chargers and not on the other team who's rolling right now. So Chiefs -3.5. You couldn't agree more with that sense there. My only question is, and you brought this up, is the Chargers are all over the place. So it gives you some.
They could have a ceiling game for sure.
Of course. And, this would be, in a very important game for more so the Chargers than the Chiefs. Which side are you going to get here? I'll be interested to see where this touches come Thursday. Go ahead.
Well, it also depends. Like, they're not going to have the advantage of seeing the Patriots play yet on Saturday night. They need to win. The 1 seed in the AFC is huge. It's the only bye. That's crucial. So, I would make the argument it's just as important to Kansas City, who's a real Super Bowl threat, whereas the Chargers are just trying to make the playoffs.
Yep. So we'll touch more on this game on the Thursday part, of course, but I'm with you there, -3.5 for the Chiefs.
Good stuff. And don't forget, a new Unreasonable Odds podcast drops later today. Julian and Steve have our friend Ross Tucker on, so be sure to download and watch for their weekend breakdown. But now let's talk hockey. We welcome in NHL Fantasy on Ice host Pete Jensen and RotoWire's AJ Scholes and Paul Bruno. Guys, NHL opening faceoff time. Need your favorite DFS plays at the following positions for tonight's 10-game NHL slate. So, Pete, who are you going to build around at center?
I'm looking at the Ottawa Senators. You could spend up for Josh Norris, who's been ripping it up lately, playing with the amazing Drake Batherson, 28 points in 21 games for Batherson, and also Brady Tkachuk. But if you're looking for more of a discounted approach because it's a tough matchup against the Tampa Bay Lightning on the road, go with Tim Stützle. He's got 6 points in his past 5 games, 17 shots on goal in the span. Remember, this was the number 3 pick in the draft from a couple of years ago. I mean, we've seen him emerge here the past few games, and I just think the Ottawa Senators are extremely sneaky in DFS and in the grand scheme of things in the entire league right now. They just dropped 8 goals on the Florida Panthers the other day, so wake up everybody and get some Senators in your lineup.
All right, what do you think, AJ? Who are you going to build around at center?
I'm actually going to the other side of this one, Pete. I think this is a Tampa team that's going to be out for blood here. They also lost to the Senators a couple of games ago 4-0. So their offensive guys are going to be looking for a measure of redemption here. And so for me, I look to Steven Stamkos at 7,400 tonight. He's not quite as high up as the top of the center price range here. And, he's coming in with 14 points in his last 10 games. He's the main driver of their offense, and I think they'll get it back going tonight.
All right, Paul, talk to me.
5 of the top 10 centers on the DraftKings DFS price list are injured or in COVID protocol tonight. There's still some great options, though, and the guys haven't mentioned a few of them. Reinhardt of Minnesota, $6,600 for 10 points and 35 shots on goal in his last 10 games, hosting Buffalo. That looks like a real nice matchup. I like the Stamkos pick by AJ. JT Miller's been on a tear for quite a while for Vancouver, and they look like a rejuvenated club under Bruce Boudreau. He cost $5,500 with 10 points, 27 shots on goal, and even 9 blocks over his last 10 games at San Jose, where the Sharks have dropped 4 of their last 6. But the screaming hot value on this board is Chandler Stevenson, who's holding Matt Pacioretty's beer, costing $3,900. This has to be a mistake. He's got 13 points of his own in his last 10 games. Stack him with his line mates tonight is my great stack choice this evening.
All right, AJ, who's looking very festive. Who is a winger that you're looking at tonight?
I am going to go with Vegas. Paul kind of alluded to this. Max Pacioretty has just been lighting it up since returning from injury. He's got it's 9 goals over that stretch, or I might have that wrong. I'm sorry. I lost that in front of me. But on the other side of the ice, the Devils have allowed 4 goals per game over their last 7 contests. So they are certainly going to allow plenty of opportunities. And I like the Vegas stack tonight as well. And Pacioretty anchoring that at the top.
All right, Paul, who's a winger that you're looking at?
Definitely Pacioretty has to be in there. The hottest goal scorer, not named Austin Matthews, in the entire league with 10 goals and 6 helpers in the last 10 games. That fills in the blanks that AJ was looking for, I think. He's in against a New Jersey club that has lost 7 of their last 8. They've been piled on to the tune of 33 goals against in that stretch. Before the game, they might even be reading the following disclaimer to the Devils fans: viewer discretion advised. This looks like a monumental mismatch. In addition, I don't feel nearly as good about Rantanen in Colorado. He's priced at $8,700, even though he has 14 points of his own in his last 10 games. But you got to consider his chances against the Nashville club that's won their last 5 games. So I'm fading him. Instead, I'd be tempted to look at the other bench and include Philip Forsberg, who has 7 goals and 4 helpers, along with 34 shots on goal in his last 10 games. He's been a consistent scorer over his year to date, in fact, and costs $6,600. And finally, Sam Reinhardt, another good-looking pick this evening at $5,900. He's across from Jonathan Huberdeau of the Panthers, top line, and has collected 11 points with 22 shots on goal in his last 10 outings. Should be a favorable matchup at home against the visiting Kings.
Pete, is the consensus Pacioretty here?
It's the hottest line in the league, and it might get even better once Jack Eichel comes back in the coming months. But yeah, I agree. He's worth spending up for. He leads the entire NHL in points per game, by the way, even higher than Ovi and McDavid and Draisaitl, if you can believe that. He's played a lot fewer games, but he's packed some punch when he's been healthy. Paul was mentioning some concerns with spending up for Mikko Rantanen at Nashville. I agree with that, but I would, counter and say that I would spend for Andrei Burakovsky, who's much cheaper than Rantanen, and he's been scoring goals with a fury lately since taking over for Gabriel Landeskog on the top line with McKinnon and Rantanen. He's got a 3-game point streak with 6 points and 11 shots, and he is quietly second most goals on the Avalanche with 12, behind 2 guys who are tied, Cale Makar 13 and Rantanen 13. So Burakovsky's a little streaky, but he's got the opportunity now. I could see him just blowing up here over the next couple of weeks before Landeskog comes back.
All right, let's look for some value on the blue line. So, Paul, who's like a low-priced defenseman that you like?
I like 3 guys on the board tonight. Jared Spurgeon is a first-pairing guy in a power play quarterback for Minnesota and has a great matchup at home against the reeling Sabres. You can have him for only $4,400. Zach Whitecloud could complete your Vegas stack with a cheap $3,500 cost. He's averaging 9.9 DraftKings points per game over his last 10 games. Maybe he passes the puck up to the big boys and watches them score a couple tonight. And then finally, Rasmus Ristolainen of Philadelphia for $3,200. First thing I do is find out who's playing Montreal, and it's the Flyers tonight. So this guy comes into a game against the Habs with his own club on a 3-game win streak, and he's an offensive-minded blue liner on their second pairing, has 17 shots on goal, and also blocks a ton of shots too to help him average over 8 DraftKings points per game in his last 10 starts. He'll top that against the lowly Habs tonight, I think.
All right, Pete, who's the low-priced defenseman you're looking at?
I'm looking at Tyler Myers. We haven't considered this guy fantasy relevant in a while, but the Canucks are playing really well under Bruce Boudreau, 5-0-0 so far, and he quietly has 3 assists and 8 shots over his past 2 games, and he's playing like 27-plus minutes a game in that span. So that Vancouver is a little flawed defensively, so they're going to lean on players like Quinn Hughes to play monster minutes, and even guys like Tyler Myers and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And when you look at the category coverage of those 2 names I just mentioned, Ekman-Larsson and Tyler Myers. They're big bodies, they're physical players, they're on the ice out there, and they bring exposure to their three strong centers that they're rolling out on separate lines right now: JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, and Bo Horvat. So I'll tap into the Canucks while they're hot. I think they have a chance to keep this thing going at the Sharks and keep it going. I mean, right, Bruce, there it is. He's been amazing for the Canucks as the coach so far to turn them around, and I think they'll keep making up for lost ground.
All right, AJ, who's a defenseman who can provide you some value here?
Well, I don't know if it's totally value, but Tony DeAngelo comes in under 6,000, so I'm going to count it myself. 5,900 for him tonight. He's going to be first game back with Carolina. He's like one of the few players right now coming off COVID protocols. Before he was out, he had 8 points in his last 8 games. He'll be on the number 1 power play unit. And in the month of December, the Detroit Red Wings have allowed the second most goals per game at 4.17. So it's a good matchup for Carolina tonight, even though, as Paul mentioned, they're going to have less than your standard 18 skaters.
All right, so I know it's early, right? But Pete, who are you leaning towards at goalie tonight?
I might regret this, but I'm picking Carter Hart. If he starts, he's assumed to be starting based on the projections at the Montreal Canadiens. Now, things can go wrong. The Canadiens will eventually win a game again. I wouldn't be shocked if it happened against the inconsistent Flyers, but the Flyers are playing well finally since their coaching change. They won at Vegas. You know, they're playing, here they're getting some big performances from guys like Cam Atkinson. And really, Carter Hart has been one of their most consistent players this season. A .915 save percentage this year with all the ups and downs and everything in between, some bad moments, a bad losing streak. But Carter Hart has emerged as fantasy relevant again. And the Flyers have quietly won 3 in a row here. And one weird split I saw, Carter Hart has a .921 save percentage on the road this season in 8 games and .910 at home. So try to make sense of that. The only thing I'll take away from it is Carter Hart has a great chance to take care of business on the road, where he's been better than at home against one of the worst teams in the league in Montreal.
AJ, who do you like between the pipes?
Well, guys, mark it down. December 16th, 2021. AJ said good things about the Flyers. I'm also going to use Carter Hart tonight. 7,800. Nice. It's just so cheap. And you look, again, looking at the December kind of sample size here, the Habs have had the worst offense in the league at 1.5 goals per game. They have no offense. They've got a bunch of guys out. The guys that should be scoring aren't. And then on the flip side, they're going to be using Caden Primo between the nets tonight. And I was chuckling when Pete was mentioning Carter Hart's like splits. Carter Hart has more road games than Caden Primo has NHL appearances. So I'm not expecting a lot out of this guy tonight. I think the Flyers are going to take it to him, and they'll pick up another win.
All right, Paul, who do you like in goal?
Well, 3 hands up for Carter Hart. He's allowed only 6 goals against in those 3 previous starts, and that's his best stretch of the year. Montreal is just terrible. This should be an easy win for the Flyers. But there are a couple other games that scream good value in the nets, and one of them is taking either Robin Lehner or Laurent Brossoit. If you got the big line for Vegas, you're expecting them to pour it on. I think the Devils will be snowed under in this one, and so those guys have a high win probability. And I know the storyline about Alexander Nedeljkovic returning to Carolina to face his depleted former club. However, he's been pulled in 2 of his last 3 starts by his current team, the Red Wings, who have been terrible defensively, as has been noted. The Wings are in tough against Carolina. It doesn't matter if they're only going to play 16 skaters. So I would rather consider Anderson or Ranta for $7,700 tonight. That's really cheap on the goalie board for a high win probability. The Canes, on the whole, have only allowed 8 goals against in their last 5 games, and they may keep it under 2 tonight as well.
All right, good stuff, guys. That'll do it for hockey. We are back to football, talking TNF next. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Sweat, and say hello to our NFL panel, DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich with a G and Reed Fowler with RotoWire's Jeff Erickson with a J. All right, fellas, NFL Thursday night showdown time. Need your favorite DFS and sports betting plays for tonight's Kansas City, Los Angeles game. All right, Jeff with a G, who are you going to put in your captain spot tonight?
So, I mean, I actually really like going with the lineup construction with a really cheap player in the captain spot tonight. But just for the sake of argument, let's talk about some of the top players here. I like Keenan Allen at 9,400. I just think this is a game where the Chargers are going to be behind. And I think that that's going to lead to Keenan Allen just getting a boatload of targets. Austin Eckler, obviously banged up. Mike Williams is actually a little bit banged up as well. But again, when you're approaching showdown slates, you think, how is the game going to break down? I think this game is going to break down with the Chargers potentially attempting 50-plus passes. And if I think that, Keenan Allen is probably going to be on the end of 10-plus of those targets. This is a player who's, when he's been healthy, he's been out there. He leads the team in targets by a ton. Obviously, if Eckler doesn't play or if Eckler is very limited, it should only lead to more Keenan Allen usage. I like the matchup. Kansas City also going to be without Snead in the back end. So give me Keenan Allen as a captain spot. You also save a lot of money.
Yeah, Keenan Allen, 14,100. Reed, who are you going to put in your captain spot?
Yeah, Jeff being a coward and going against his own advice of wanting to pay down. I think that's a great strategy, right? Pay down and get these guys up there. If you're going to do that, you'd probably have to bank on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, being that guy, and then getting some of the other high-priced guys. But I'm going with Travis Kelce. This is Jeff's favorite narrative of he's due, right? He's absolutely due, and he hasn't done well over the past couple of weeks. And now you get a Chargers team that ranks 6th in giving up the most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, or 6th or 7th. And this is a huge divisional game on primetime. What does Travis Kelce do every single time? He does it, and he's cheap. We're getting Travis Kelce cheap because he hasn't been playing well for the past couple of weeks. I get that you can go with one of these quarterbacks. That's fine. I can get you to go with Tyreek Hill, who I do like, in terms of a prop bet, which we'll get to in a little bit. And Austin Eckler, reports are coming out this morning that he's not going to get a full workload. So that does scare me. So I'm going to go with Travis Kelce.
All right, Jeff with a J, where are you going for your captain spot?
I'm going to go Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm worried a little bit about the volume, but I mean, you look at the Chargers, it's Captain Obvious really in a way. The Chargers are 32nd in DVOA against the run, 31st in rushing yards allowed. I mean, every little metric works in favor of them. The only thing I'm concerned a little bit is how much they split with the volume with him, with Darrell Williams. But I do think that it's the proper setup. That way, and I'll probably go with CH in my captain spot and still use Herbert as one of my flex plays and just try to take advantage of the volume that way.
All right, so let's talk about value here now, Reed. What do you think is the best value play out there?
Yeah, so since Pierce isn't here, I have to dumpster dive for him. I'm going Noah 50 Shades of Grey, Jesse, at $200. Okay, I'm sure. Look, you can go with Guyton, you can go with Palmer, Pringle, DeMarcus. I'm sure one of these guys they're going to mention one of those 4 players. But Gray, he is that tight end. We see this all the time, whether it's Blake Bell, whether it's Sherman, whether it's whoever near the red zone. When everyone's focused on 87, when everyone's focused on Tyreek Hill, when everyone's focused on Patrick Mahomes, potentially with a naked bootleg, they throw it to a tight end. And Noah Gray is second in line after Travis Kelce. He's $200. I like that there. He is the dart throw, the Pierce Dietrich special dart throw for value plays tonight.
That's some super value.
There we go.
Jeff with a J, where are you going?
I like that one, by the way. I like Pringle at 26. I think that his volume's picked up a little bit. Wasn't as high last week, but last week the game flow was so wild that they just pulled off that foot off the pedal so much. Surprisingly, Josh Gordon, being a COVID guy on the COVID list, is actually factoring in our favor on this one here too. Who knew that Josh Gordon was going towards our game script here a little bit here? But I'm going to go ahead with Pringle.
All right, Jeff with a G, where are you going to go for your value play?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just like when Pierce mentions these guys who we're not even sure if they exist or not, I'll try and pick things up here with actual value plays who will get you points tonight. I love the Byron Pringle call. That's one of the players I think you can put in your captain spot tonight. And if you get that long touchdown and Patrick Mahomes performs as I think he will, which is with the massive game, you can roster studs in each of the rest of your positions. So I love that call. But I think there's playable players on the other side of the ball as well. Josh Palmer got a bump in snaps with Keenan Allen out last week, but I think Jalen Guyton is actually the big play guy you should be looking at on the other side for the Chargers. Again, touchdowns in each of his last couple games. He's being used downfield, and he's realistically the player who's been seeing the field as like the third wide receiver more than Palmer. Palmer was more of like a one game off substitution. I would really think about Guyton as well as a potential captain spot because, as I mentioned, I think you're going to see a lot of passing in this game.
All right, let's talk about player props. What is your favorite player prop available on the board, Jeff, with a J?
I like Darrell Williams over 2.5 receptions. Since week 5, he's had one game where he hasn't had 3 or more receptions. I think he'll be involved in the passing game a little bit more. You get a lot on the plus side in the juice here, which it's hard to find a player prop with a plus side to begin with there. So I'm going to lean in that direction. I also kind of like the over on the yards there too.
All right, Jeff with a G, what is your favorite player prop on the board?
I'm going to go Patrick Mahomes over. It's been moving. Like this whole segment, it's been moving. It's at 281.5 right now. I like going over it. I think you can go over it. Anything under like 285. This Chargers defense is banged up, man. Asante Samuel, questionable. Derwin James, questionable. Those guys have not practiced. So even if they are active, I mean, like it's a rough coming in on a short week with no practice against a motivated Patrick Mahomes. That is rough. I think Patrick Mahomes easily goes over this today.
All right, Reed, favorite player prop?
Yeah, I mentioned him earlier. It's Tyreek Hill over 6.5 receptions. That's minus 130. So you got to lay a ton of juice there. Chargers are 21st in covering the slot and 16th against the deep ball. What does Tyreek Hill do? He does both of those things. I think it's his prime time. I'm leaning heavily on both these guys in Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. So over 6.5 receptions, Jesse at minus 130.
All right, slate approved pick time. Need your favorite bet on the board. And Jeff, G-Unit Jeff, we're going to start with you.
I'm just gonna take the Chiefs on the spread at minus 3.5. We have seen earlier in the week we saw this line move up to 4. It started to look like it may even get to like minus 6 by game time. Then the COVID news came in. But guess what? Like the Chiefs have a pretty deep defense. They have guys in the secondary like Mike Hughes who can step in. Their pass rush has kind of been good all around, even without Chris Jones over the last 3 games. And again, the Chargers are banged up. Eckler may not even get a full workload. They got 2 key defensive pieces banged up. I think the Chiefs cover this easily. I think you could even go to the alternate point spread and take the Chiefs at like minus 9 or minus 10 or something and get really good value there. Just bet the Chiefs.
All right, Reed, favorite bet on the board?
Dang, Chiefs minus 9, minus 10. Jeff's looking for a blowout here. Jeff with a G and G unit. I'm going Patrick Mahomes over 2.5 passing touchdowns. Jeff with a J mentioned you can't get a lot of plus money on these props. That's at plus like 145, I believe, on the DK Sportsbook right now. Talk about the secondary. Jeff laid it out, right? Secondary is banged up for the Chargers. And I do think that when you have a defense that ranks 21st in red zone coverage for the Chargers, a guy like Patrick Mahomes is going to tear that up. So give me Patrick Mahomes over 2.5 passing touchdowns at plus 145.
Jeff, J Money, favorite bet on the board?
I like the over in this game here at 52. I mean, I think you mentioned the secondary injuries. No Derwin James possibly, or at least a banged up Derwin James. Samuel, this is his second concussion, bad stuff there. Chris Jones out for the Chiefs is huge too. So, as good as the Chiefs have been playing defensively, you take away him from that pass rush. He was, moving him to the inside was so big for the Chiefs. I think that's really going to hurt their pass rush. Although at the flip side, Slater's not going to be there for the Chargers to help protect Herbert. But at the same time, I think it's just going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be like a 31-30 sort of game.
All right, good stuff, guys. That will do it for our football talk. We're going to wrap up the show next talking about the NBA slate tonight. It is 4 games. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Sweat, final block of the show, everybody. Let's say hello to our NBA panel. DraftKings contributors Gary and Thorne and Matt Meiselman with RotoWire's Nick Whalen. Fellas, NBA best bets time. Favorite DraftKings Sportsbook plays for the 4-game NBA slate tonight. So, big game in Brooklyn tonight as the Sixers play the Nets. Harden and several Nets are on the reserve COVID list. So, how do you see guys playing this one playing out? What's a bet for this one that you like? Because you got to take into consideration a couple of these key players are out. Gary, and what do we think?
I think I'm just going to go with Philadelphia money line. I know this is a 76ers team that just dropped a game to a COVID and injury-riddled Heat team, but that Brooklyn Nets win over the Raptors, I mean, they scored 121 points per 100 possessions. KD had a triple-double. Patty Mills went for 30. They had 20 offensive rebounds, 30 second-chance points, and they still needed a late 3 in overtime to beat the Raptors, who were also pretty injured and beat up. I just think the 76ers at full strength, I just think they have to win this game. I don't know how sustainable Kevin Durant playing 45 minutes a game is. I just don't think Brooklyn can keep doing that. I just feel like the 76ers have to win this game, and I'm actually a little surprised that they are underdogs in this one.
All right, Matt, what's your take?
So I'll explain why they're underdogs. I don't know that we know for sure that Joel Embiid is playing tonight. So I totally agree with everything Gary said. If Embiid's in, then I like the Sixers a lot. I think they're the much superior team given the current state of the Nets roster, where they're playing 4 or 5 guys that are basically G League players. Durant's obviously great. Patty Mills and Blake Griffin are solid players. Claxton's probably a decent role player, and beyond that, it just drops off very, very quickly. So if Embiid's in the lineup, I think the Sixers actually will wind up as the favorites before this game gets going. But I'm a little reluctant to recommend betting on them until we know for sure that he's going to be out there. We actually saw the other night Embiid got scratched at 8:05 for an 8:10 tip. So this may be one to wait on. But assuming Embiid is out there, I do think that the Sixers should be able to win. They probably do wind up being the favorites by the closing line.
All right, Nick, Brooklyn, the Sixers, what do we think? What's a bet for this one that you like?
Well, excuse me. Wow. I think Matt is spot on. First of all, that this line almost reflects the belief that Joel Embiid won't play tonight. And, it's worth noting that he was nursing an injury going into their last game on Wednesday night. And like you said, we had kind of a sketchy situation with him being scratched earlier this week. So I think there's a pretty decent chance that the Sixers do hold him out on the second night of a back-to-back. And Seth Curry could also be in that situation. He played through a shoulder injury last night. So it does feel like maybe, the line makers know something that's not quite public yet. So I'm with those guys. If Embiid does play, I think this becomes a really attractive situation to maybe jump on that Sixers money line. If he doesn't play, I mean, it's the KD show, right? So at that point, maybe you look to a Kevin Durant over 50.5 points, rebounds, assists prop. He can't really keep doing this. I do agree with Gary in there. But at the same time, it did kind of seem like Durant reveled in the opportunity to kind of be a one-man team and lead a lot of these younger guys and role players to a win the other night. It seemed like he really enjoyed that. So obviously you don't want to be doing that for 7 games in a row. But if the Sixers are without Embiid, I think maybe KD sees this as another opportunity to go off. He's had very few situations like this where he's had to be the man throughout his career. And I don't know, I got the sense that he enjoyed it the other night. So KD over 50.5 points, rebounds, assists is one that I'm keeping an eye on.
All right, Matt, what's your favorite game to go over its total? This Nets 76ers game actually has the highest total on the board.
Am I allowed to say none of the games? I mean, as it stands right now, I don't love any overs, but that could change. If Embiid doesn't play, then the main thing that drops off for Philly, obviously Embiid's a good scorer, but his defense is really where he shines. And like we already talked about, the Nets defense right now is in pretty bad shape with all the guys that are missing. So I like that game to go over if Embiid doesn't play. Otherwise, I'm really not sure. This could be a night where all 4 games go under. I'm not especially excited about any of them, but if there's no Embiid, I think this one could go over.
All right, Nick, if you have to choose one game to go over its total, where are you going?
Well, Matt took my line of, do I have to absolutely do this? But, for the sake of the show, for the sake of discussion, I guess I'll throw out, maybe that Knicks-Rockets game could be a wild one. The total's only 214. I know if you look at, the recent games for the Knicks, they've scored 96, 97, 87, and 102 in their last 4. So it's not super encouraging, but you get Houston on the second leg of a back-to-back. Houston is super banged up. Should get Eric Gordon back tonight, but we're expecting Christian Wood to miss at least one more game. They have a few other guards who are out of this one. Rockets are 3-0 toward the over on second half of back-to-backs this season. The defense, tends to lag in those situations. So I don't know, maybe you can make an argument that this is kind of a get-right game for that Knicks offense, which has really been struggling. And, this is the team that you kind of want to target for a high-scoring game. So, maybe look into Knicks Rockets. That's all I'll say about that.
Gary, it sounds like nobody wants to say any of these games are going to go over their total.
Yeah, it's not the most appealing over slate. I think when in doubt, you're never totally wrong just looking at the Wizards games to go over, especially this recent incarnation of the Wizards. The problem there is the Suns are a team that thrive in unders. They're one of the best defensive teams we have. Obviously, they're still missing Devin Booker. At least they have DeAndre Ayton back in the fold. That does help their offense, but it also helps their defense. So I would just say of the four, I'd probably lean most towards that Wizards-Suns game just because across their last 10, the Wizards defense has basically regressed to what it was in recent seasons past. They're giving up over 118 points per 100 possessions. All the good vibes that we saw in October and November have just vanished. This really is just a team that looks like a shell of itself right now. And in that same 10-game span where they've been getting absolutely demolished on defense, the over is hit in 7 of those 10 games. So if you want to take an over, I guess Washington's the way to go. But again, I'm not loving any of these games.
Nick, which team is a lock to cover? Biggest spread is between the Pistons and Pacers, 10.5.
You could probably talk me into the Knicks covering 5 in Houston, but I think that Suns-Wizards game that Garion just touched on is what I'm going to be targeting here. 9 is a big number for the Suns to cover in this game, but Wizards have dropped 6 of 7. Not really sure what's going on with Bradley Beal. He's having kind of a bizarre season. It feels like they have a ton of 3s and 4s who are just okay. And, they all kind of play 15 to 20 minutes, but none of them really do anything. And meanwhile, even without Devin Booker, the Suns are just a well-oiled machine at this point. We're going on now, their second straight regular season where they've kind of reached that Milwaukee Bucks, Utah Jazz territory where, yeah, you might still have some questions about their longevity or how they match up with certain teams in a playoff series. But this is one of those teams that just feels like it wins every single night. And, something has to go wrong for them to lose any regular season games. So even without Devin Booker, it still feels like they kind of have that aura. And then you look at the Wizards, who are 4-12-1 against the spread on the road this season. That is the second worst mark in the league, ahead of only the lowly Portland Trailblazers. Wizards are on a back-to-back. Suns had last night off. Just kind of a tough spot overall for this Washington team.
Gary, are you also looking at that Suns-Wizards game?
Yeah, I had that same stat, 4-12-1, the Wizards record ATS on the road this season. They are also 1-5-1 ATS their past 7 games as a road underdog. They are 2-7-1 ATS their past 10 games overall. Again, the magic is just gone with this Wizards team. It's bad. They just look discombobulated. It looks like they don't enjoy playing with each other anymore. I don't know. They just don't seem right, and Phoenix is not the team you want to be playing if you're not operating and firing at 100%. They will just pick you apart. So this line has moved. I mean, I checked it half an hour ago. It was Suns -8. Now it's -9. So maybe just jump in now because I could see this line getting a little bit higher even.
Matt, what do you think? Which team is a lock to cover?
Nick and Gary already covered it, and the Suns were -8 right up until we were about to start the show. So I was going to say Suns -8. Now I have to take Suns -9. I'm not as excited about it. So I'll go back to the game we were talking about before, where we mentioned that if Embiid plays, the Sixers look really good. If Embiid doesn't play, I think Nets -1 becomes the best bet of the day. To me, that line is right in the middle where Embiid's maybe worth 6 points or so to the spread, and we're going to see it move 3 in either direction based on whether he's in or out. We just saw Philly without Embiid get blown out by the Grizzlies. He really is the whole team right now without Ben Simmons obviously playing much this year. And like Nick said, Seth Curry could be out for this one too. He's been dealing with an injury. He's missed some games recently. This could be a really shorthanded Philly team that also has some COVID issues to some of their role players who normally would be asked to step up when Embiid doesn't play. So if he's not in the lineup and you can get the Nets as small favorites, even with all the guys that they have to play in their rotation who usually don't play, Kevin Durant basically against the Sixers backups, I'll take the Nets in that scenario. So if Embiid's out, I like the Nets a lot.
All right, let's wrap it up with your favorite player prop available on the board. Gary, where are you going?
So let's go back to that Rockets-Knicks game. As Nick talked about, probably no Christian Wood tonight. Hasn't officially been ruled out, but it seemed like it was pretty definitive yesterday that he wasn't going to play in their next 2 games. So that basically just leaves Eric Gordon, who so far this season with Wood and with Green and with Porter off the court leads the team with a 27% usage rate. He's also averaging 29.2 points per 100 possessions with those 3 guys off the court. And his point prop tonight is just 16.5, and it's even money, plus 100 for him to go over. I just don't know who else is going to score for this Rockets team, especially if DJ Augustine wants to get ejected in the 3rd quarter again. So I just think with no other options, Eric Gordon's going to have a high volume night. If he can make even 40% of his shots, he should clear this number pretty easily.
Matt.
I'm going to the same game. We actually got news this morning that Kevin Knox was added to the list of Knicks players that are in COVID protocols. So they're pretty shorthanded. And I honestly think you could target almost any Knicks guard for an overbet on their props. The number that stands out to me is Evan Fournier. I think he's the guy who gets the biggest bump in minutes security with Knox not playing. Usually see plenty of Burks, plenty of Rose, but sometimes Fournier, if he's not playing great, loses minutes to those guys, or even Kevin Knox. I think there's been a couple games recently where Knox took minutes away from Fournier, but Knox isn't there. Fournier's points, rebounds, assist line is only at 16.5. I'm kind of surprised that this hasn't gone up. Maybe Knox just isn't seemingly important enough to adjust the lines. I do think this will go up throughout the day, but I think you can look at just about anyone on the Knicks with this really shorthanded roster in a good matchup. Fournier is my favorite choice, though.
All right, under a minute, Nick, real quick, favorite player prop.
Well, I mentioned that KD over 50.5 points, rebounds, assists. I mean, this is a team that has Patty Mills now as its second option. Someone with the unfortunate name of David Duke is now the starting shooting guard for the Brooklyn Nets. So I still do love that. Looking at that Knicks Rockets game, Julius Randle over 1.5 steals and blocks, kind of a niche prop here, but you're getting plus money, plus 120. Houston has the highest turnover percentage in the league by far. Unfortunately, a couple of the guards that are responsible for that are not playing in this game, but still, I think this is actually a really good spot. Could be a sloppy game from Houston on the second half of a back-to-back. So if you're looking to kind of go off the board a little bit, I like that Randall prop.
All right, good stuff, guys. Thank you. That is the show. The SWAT will be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Stay tuned for the Mountain Sim, starting with the Cowboys at the Chargers at noon. Then check out the slate at 5 p.m. Eastern for more NFL talk with Adam Coffield.